Hello, rugby fans, and welcome to the USA Rugby Clubhouse, episode 3, brought to you by rugbyshop.com for all your rugby apparel needs. I'm your host, Ben Foden. As always, I'm joined with Mike Petrie. Mike, how are you? Enjoying life on the couch still?
Oh, fantastic. I'm not a couch though. I'm not a couch guy though, folks. Although I imagine this weekend with your bye weekend, you spent a lot of time just lounging about. But it is quite nice. It is quite nice to just sit down and lounge and watch the games from the comfort of your home. It's not bad.
You're onto something. I think I can get used to this lifestyle. Just watching, sitting as a purist, sitting on the couch, watching.
I was out there on my balcony, sun shining, checking out the games, hanging out with my family. It wasn't bad, folks. It's a good life on this side. It's not too bad.
Now March is gone. Spring's here. We're in New York. Finally, the cold weather's gone. I'm looking forward to a few home fixtures now as well. I don't have to do all this traveling to New Orleans or to San Diego, Las Vegas, or wherever. So I'm looking forward to, we've got our next game's against Atlanta, not too far away, a little trip across. So yeah, I'm looking forward to getting back out there as well. You always feel like a little bit refreshed, a bit more pep in your step when you've had a week off as well. So looking forward to getting back to training actually and seeing the boys. That's what you always miss when you've been away for a bit.
Yeah, for sure. But like you said, I think now with the seasons changing a little bit and some of the teams up here in the north, they're going to start having some home games. You may see some different results. I think what we're starting to see is that home field advantage right now in this COVID time is like huge. I mean, not having to travel with all the logistical nightmare that is traveling during COVID turns out to be a pretty big deal. You can see from some of these teams having a little bit of problems here and there on the road. And I think, you can speak to that more intelligently than I can, obviously, as someone who's been on the road with New York during these COVID times. But some really, really fantastic games this past weekend, huh, folks?
Yeah, there was only 4 fixtures. 4 lucky teams got the bye week, Rooney being one of them. But I think the first game to talk about is the real, probably surprising. It's a bit of an upset because Utah were running so hot. And the New England-Utah game was very, very close. And if you watch the game, it finished 22-21. Utah scored in the last sort of play of the game as well to sort of make it look a bit more flattering. But Utah sort of had territory, had possession. They squandered a few opportunities. But New England, they really toughed it out. They were very stubborn in defense. They didn't give up. The 2 tries that I saw from Utah were sort of, worldies, like chip and chases over the top, regathers, offloads in a contact, and scoring eventually from that. So I think one thing that you look at someone like the New England Free Jacks is they're just very organized. Defensively, they look very organized. They play proper rugby in terms of their strategy, their defense strategy, their attacking plan. And I just thought they look like I think they're the team that's grown most throughout the whole competition. They had the first game against LA where they took a bit of a hiding, but they had to do a long travel all the way over to LA. And I think they learned a few things, and now they've just started to get things ticking, and they've taken 2 big scouts in the last 2 weeks.
And don't forget, this was something that I definitely overlooked last week, and this was an error on my part. This was the first home game for the Free Jacks ever in the history of their organization, right? So they went last year. The games were too early in the season to play anything at home in the New England area. So now this past weekend they get a chance to host Utah, albeit during COVID, but nonetheless, what that's like. I mean, think back to our first game at MCU Park here in Brooklyn. We played Toronto. That was an epic clash that came down to the wire in the exact same fashion as that game did. And as the home team, we persevered. There's just that much more energy that you bring when it's that historic moment of the first game in your own home arena. And, the Paul Revere-esque rider on the land, carrying his light, riding around the stadium on his horse. I mean, that whole atmosphere, that's got to be incredible for New England. They were obviously riding that wave against a really hot Warriors team, and credit to them, they pulled that one out for sure. And they played really well. They're a well-drilled team. They're organized. And we said from the beginning that New England was going to be a really solid team. So it is a bit of a surprise just because of how well Utah's been playing, but New England's a good side. So I'm never surprised to see them win.
And then it moves us nicely on to the next game. DC, who, won, they drew their first game against NOLA and then won their second game. So everyone was sort of thinking that they were going to add another victory against a Toronto team that looked a bit, out of sorts, usually very strong Toronto team. But actually, Toronto blew DC away. Really impressed with Toronto. I think we were always sort of expecting them to get better and become the team that they have been in the past years. But I mean, they won very comfortably with a score of 40-19. And Danny Tusitala, our guest on later on, is usually the spark in that team. But even he even had a bit of a quiet game in the centres, their big talisman American, your friend. He did a bit of damage. He scored a nice try just before half time. But really, Toronto were always in control of that game. They played again with good tactics, kicked in the right areas of the field, played in the right areas of the field, and their pack was very impressive. They really leaned on their driving mauls. Their scrum looked solid, and it was the sort of the Toronto of old, really, when I watched them play.
Yeah, I mean, Toronto, what we've both been saying is just a great organization, always has been from the time they really came into the league 2 years ago with us. And so they were a bit sleepy at the beginning. It was only a matter of time before they started to wake up, and they've obviously hit their stride here against DC, who has been playing well. They've got a couple of really outstanding players, as we'll learn more about when we talk to Danny in a few moments. But yeah, I mean, again, another team kind of like the Free Jacks. I'm never really surprised to see Toronto win. I'm excited for them that they seem to have found the rhythm. They are still living away from home in Atlanta. So, hopefully they're starting to find their rhythm here and they could start to put up some big numbers in the coming weeks still.
And sharing the field with Atlanta hosted San Diego, the first away trip to San Diego, and it really told. Atlanta sort of, again, were very tactically astute. They had a very good kicking game. Their back three were very impressive. Their new kid on the block, Mark O'Keefe, old Rudy boy, now over in Atlanta, scored 3 tries in his first 2 games, scored 2 tries at the weekend. The back three looked very impressive in that game, if I'm honest. And obviously, Rooney have got Atlanta next week, so I'm doing a bit of studying, a bit of tape on those guys, and they look very impressive in that game. So San Diego, a little bit out of sorts. Your superstar, I know you fangirled over him last week, Nate Oshberger wasn't playing again, which is a big loss for them, because I think when him and Joe Peterson are playing together, that 9 and 10 duo just worked very well at controlling the game. Whereas I felt that Joe's kicking game was a little bit off for him. Usually he controls that part of his game very well. And they had a few moments of magic where they scored some good tries. Song Wuxing again making a dent in the middle and finishing off from 40 yards. Orderly, their fullback as well, with some nice feet and a nice cut at the end to score a try as well. But Atlanta really were ruthless. They got themselves in good field position, good territory. Their pack looked good at times. Sometimes it was a bit weird that it looked like they were evenly matched in the pack, but then suddenly, Atlanta turned it on, got a scrum penalty, and turned it over and scored a try in the second half. So it's interesting that Atlanta seems to be a team that's growing as well and getting better with every game.
So that game was pretty special for me because one of my former players from when I coached at Xavier, who's a scrum half, Eamon Matthews, came off the bench, made his first appearance at scrum half for Atlanta, gets his first Major League Rugby cap, a kid out of Xavier, kid out of St. Bonaventure, been working his butt off. Really, he's earned every right to be on the field in the MLR, and I'm so excited for him. So that game in and of itself was quite special for me to be able to be part of that in some way. But, so congratulations to Eamon and certainly to Atlanta as well. But I mean, San Diego's been the biggest surprise for me so far. But it's just, if you look at the tables now, it's really strange to look at that Western Conference and see both Seattle and San Diego sitting at the bottom, right? It's like those are the 2 teams that have been perennially the 2 trendsetters as far as Major League Rugby goes, and to see them sitting way down at the bottom of the table is just straight up surprising. But like you said, when you look at their roster and you realize that their lineup hasn't really been at full strength yet, well, then clearly San Diego still needs to get that lineup together to really find the rhythm. But that said, I think this season, if nothing else, is going to be really about, teams are going to go through this from between now and July when the championship is later in the season. It's about depth. It's about, can you win games when you don't have your full lineup in with different combinations? And the teams that can do that and put the pieces together, I think, are the teams that are going to obviously be successful long term. So San Diego's having a bit of struggle with that right now. Again, they're like Toronto. They're living away from home. They're living in Las Vegas. That could play a factor as well. But they're a team that hopefully starts to find a bit of rhythm too at some point when they start to get that team together. But again, it's about those combos. It's about having depth. And right now we're not seeing that from San Diego. So hopefully they start to get on the right track soon. But credit to Atlanta for really doing a great job. And of course, to our boy Mark O'Keefe down there, former New York guy, doing work down in Atlanta. By the way, do you think Mark O'Keefe still goes by the Cowboy down there in Atlanta?
100%. He's still got the cowboy hats on. I'm sure he's living up to the reputation brilliantly. The last game, obviously, one we talked about at the end of the last show, really interesting to watch. Austin Gilgronies taking on Houston Sabercats in the Carbach Texas Cup, they've called it, which I think is awesome. They've made this big rivalry between those two Southern teams, which has been very interesting. But again, Mikey, Houston coming up with a big fat 0 on the scoreboard is a little bit worrying, especially after we bigged them up so much first week. I think we really have sort of hexed that team. But we sort of knew that the Gilgronies they were due a big game. They'd lost their first 2 games, I think, by 3 points in week 1, 2 points in week 2. And you could tell that they're a good team. They're just waiting for that win. And this week they got it 26-0 against Houston, who have been struggling to sort of get any forms of attack going. And I think the Gilgronies will take a lot of confidence from that fixture.
I'll be the first to admit it. I was 1-3 last week with my choices for who was going to come out on top, and this was the only game that I got right. And I think the only reason I got it right was because I actually thought the Sabercats were going to pull it off, and in hopes that they were going to win, we went with Austin. But really, Austin's a very athletic team. We knew that from when we played them out in Vegas last year. They're an incredible side, and they've really built up that rivalry between Houston and Austin, and it's lived up to it, right? It's lived up to the hype. Austin did a fantastic job. They put on a great display. Houston started strong, but they seem to have been losing track these past couple of weeks. Hopefully they can start to get themselves on the right track, but it's really cool to see Austin really start to come forward as a team that's really going to hopefully be a team that's going to give teams problems throughout the season.
I don't know if you saw, Mikey, because I know you mentioned last week when you watched the King powerbomb the Rooster, though. Something interesting that Austin they're doing like a blind date where they're getting some girl to come on, and she's sort of asking questions for fans to try and win a date to go on a date with this girl. I found that very interesting. Again, the American influence on rugby in the MLR. Do you think there's a future for this? Is this going to be a weekly occurrence in Austin?
I don't know. Obviously, every team is out there on social media doing whatever they can to sort of get engaged with the community. And Austin seems to have taken a very unique angle there with that one. I don't know much about it, but it sounds interesting. And at least, hey, it's different. They're trying something different. They're going out on a limb a little bit, and then credit to them for trying to get people into that. But speaking of Kings and power bombing Roosters and highlights and everything else, that kind of brings us really nicely into this week's segment. Let's check out some highlights from round 3, courtesy of the MLR.
Man who was born in Tonga, 24-year-old. Goes to the front, take there by Luke White. Here we go, set low. Maul set. At the back it is with Vailanu. 5 meters out. Tusitala waits for the Seawolves. Du Plessis told to use it. They're over the line. First try of the game. It's early champagne for the Giltinis. Vailanu, quick hands. Great skill. JP Smith ranging up the big prop forward.
In a short pitch here for San Diego to try to get the first try of this match.
And they've still got advantage. And there's Sam Wuching, as we talked about, Ben. Look at how powerful he is with the ball in his hand.
He is a beast. Here's Peterson, the KG veteran, bounce to the outside, and they take it in. There's the dot, and it is put down by Beyond Bassan for the first try. And Pete, they capitalize off that miscue by Atlanta.
Someone, Salo's someone that's played in the best leagues in the world against some of the other best props, and there'll be a lot of learning that happens.
Here's a chance now as Wuching gets free. Sam Wuching, can he get in? No, he's dragged down inside of the 5, but he fights. And Wuching, we talked about his athleticism, his strength, his power, and everything he does. Taken out of there, spun back by Reese Heaton now. He finds Jansi van Rensburg. Spun back. Now outside they go with it. And up the touchline and in! Another try for Rugby ATL. It's O'Keefe who's got the hot hand, his second in the match.
Isn't it working out for them?
He looks like a genius. San Diego scrum.
Unfortunately for him, he's just signed for Grenoble as well today.
Here's a chance, and there is Jason Dom. That one will count. And Jason Dom continues to have a great start to the 2021 season. 4 players, including the dangerous Kurt Coleman, out with season-ending injuries. And he talked too about what you talked about, hot and cold, finding that consistency. They found it tonight. Here's a chance for San Diego as Ogley trying to take one in late and does. And there's the dot, and there's a try for San Diego.
Here's Whippy. Kick over the top for Whippy, gets through the traffic, needs to bounce, won't need to bounce because he gets on the full. Whippy has Wilson, Wilson has open space, his brother Gil. Oh, I thought we were going to have Wilson on Wilson, but Whippy in support, and the Warriors. Defensively, great with ball in hand too.
Hey Dan, we talk about what's fixable for Utah since they've kind of squandered their opportunities in the last 20. I got some concerns if I'm Ryan Martin on the Free Jack side. They have not been able to produce a try this half. Speaking of producing tries.
Well, there it is, a bit of Teo brilliance, Mikey Teo.
Opportunity for a decoy play or something to that effect, Matt, that he can draw in some defenders and create some space elsewhere.
It seems like the tide has turned a little bit. Old Glory has had possession and they've started to impart their will. And there he is again. Threaten Palamo. Threaten Palamo. Can he get it in? Try for Threaten Palamo and a beauty mark. You called it. And then started dabbling in rugby. There he is again.
You'll see here, I mean, it all just started. It was a one-on-one tackle. You really don't want to have to take.
All right, speaking of threatening, here come the Toronto Arrows again. Mieres gets it into Detroit. There's Deanna, who had a great try in the first half. He was all over the pitch. And there's a big break. Here it goes. Quattrell. Quattrell with the score for the Arrows. I beg your pardon, that is Ben Lesage. Takes it to the ground. And it's spilled and turned over. Toronto again on attack. There's Lesage. Oh, a great pass to Tucolette. Back inside, it's gonna be Higgins for the try.
No other way to describe this other than champagne rugby, Matt McCarthy. And quick to pounce as well. That pass right there, miracle pass to the number 15, Tucolette, and it was a mere formality to get it back in.
No, he's in, you're in. This is the ball.
Cook. Will he make a move? Following the bodies in the surge for AG. Fans can feel it in Austin. Cook. It's a try for AG.
Absolutely outstanding maul from the AG. Clean take on the line out, and then the big men up front got rumbling. Mason Cook.
Hey, what's up, everyone? It's Danny Tusitala here from Auckland, NZ, and you're watching USA Rugby Clubhouse.
All right, folks, I have the privilege of introducing our next guest, who has been really one of the most exciting players this season in Major League Rugby to watch, whether he's wearing the 9 shirt or the 10 shirt for DC, Old Glory. He is doing a tremendous job. He is just lighting up the scene. Danny Tusitala from Auckland, New Zealand. Welcome to the USA Rugby Clubhouse.
Hey, man, thanks for having me. What an intro. Thanks for having me.
Haven't even been to your international career yet, and you're grabbing highlights, not just for your hair color and your hairstyle, but scoring tries, length of the field tries. You're setting a light, dude. Yeah, been a pleasure to watch you over the last couple of weeks. You've been really, really on fire. The heartbeat of that DC team.
Oh, thank you.
So Danny, you've got an impressive resume, right? When you look at your rugby CV, you've played in the Mitre 10 in New Zealand. You've played for Samoa in 7s and 15s. From the looks of it, I think you played Pro D2 in France as well for a little bit. One of the most renowned, violent leagues of all time. I can't wait to pick your brain about the Pro D2 as well. Yeah. I see Foden smirking there a little bit. But what's it like so far? How's life in the capital of the United States down in DC playing professional rugby?
It's been awesome. I think, obviously, I guess due to COVID, there's not much you can do here. But from what I've been able to, I guess, get around and get out and see a bit of the scenery. Obviously, with the nice weather here, it's been good. Last year when I was here, it was cold, and yeah, it was kind of just too cold for me. So I've been lucky enough that obviously the season's in this part of the year where it's a bit warmer. And, I guess there's the cherry blossom season here in DC. So it's been awesome being around the monuments, the White House and things like that. So, we're pretty lucky, obviously seeing things you see in the movies, to be able to see it in real life. It's been unreal.
So how did DC come and get you, Danny? How did the phone call come about to, entice you over to the MLR and play in American League?
Oh, it was funny. I think it was 2018 was it, or 2019? I was still on the circuit, and I decided I kind of just went home after, I guess, my last leg in Vancouver, and I just kind of lost sort of interest in playing. I was just like, it's a bit too much. It was a bit draining, traveling back and forth, and didn't really have much time at home. So then I went through probably a 2-month period where I wasn't working, and I was just like not training as hard, and just randomly got a phone call from Andrew Douglas and asked me, hey, we're starting a new team here in DC. Would you be interested? And I think that would have been around April. And I said, oh yeah, man, I'm keen. Like, I've got nothing going for me at the moment. So then when I said to Andrew I was keen, at the time I wasn't really playing club rugby. I was playing senior ones or under 85s at the time. And then a couple of months on, I was lucky enough I got selected into the Mitre 10 Cup. So it kind of happened all fast for me. And then from Mitre 10 Cup, I just kind of found the passion to play again, and found sort of that new surge of like, oh yeah, sweet, I could really make this a thing. And then lucky enough, I did really well with Auckland, and then Andrew Douglas was like, yeah, sweet, we'll bring you here to DC, and then came through here last year, and I just really enjoyed it. Just something different. I think, I felt like when I came here and we had our first home game, I was like, man, people really do come watch rugby here. Whereas in New Zealand, we don't really get much crowd, and people can sort of just watch it from home. So I think that was one of the drawing points, is when I came to DC, and just the support and the atmosphere that we had was unreal.
Danny, had you been to the States before you came and played here in DC?
I came with my family in 2007. We visited family here in, I think, San Diego. So I have a lot of family in LA and San Diego. So that was a wee while ago, 2007. We were lucky enough to do a few of the theme parks, which I'm hoping to do with my family once they come over. So looking forward to that.
So the reason I ask is because I'm thinking to myself, so as a player that's played at such high level around the world, what kind of expectations did you have walking into a professional rugby league in the United States? And how has your experience so far either met or perhaps even exceeded or even fallen short possibly of what your expectations were for what you thought you were going to get when you came here?
I think at first for me, it was more just I had to be a lot open-minded. Obviously coming into the US, knowing that they didn't have sort of like the background and upbringing that I think us in New Zealand, obviously in the UK, we're lucky enough to have it from when we were at a young age. So I was always open-minded when I came here, and I felt like, oh man, these guys are really good. That exceeded my expectations. I was quite taken away by the level of rugby last season. And then for this season, it's been unreal. Like, they leveled up. Everyone's leveled up. All the teams. You can see in the games. It's like, it's awesome footy to watch. Like, a lot of people from NZ ask me, "Oh, what's the MLR like?" And I just tell them, "Oh, I'd say some games are Mitre 10 standard, and obviously, and it's only going to grow. It's in its 4th season, and I feel lucky enough that like I've had the opportunity to be a part of something new, and I think." For me, that's sort of like, oh, okay, sweet. If I'm going to make this work, I want to be able to make an impact. And like you guys were saying earlier, like, how do we grow the game here in America? And I think like it's growing. Like last season to this season, you can see the massive change in the level of rugby, and that only makes us better. And I know as for myself, I'm only getting better as a player every week, because I'm coming into Monday and I'm like, how do I get better? Because I know we're playing so-and-so, and it's like, look, they've got this player and that player. And I'm like, so I've got to up my game and make sure that I'm on top of that and not get complacent. And that's just what the league's bringing to it now.
So DC seems to be doing everything right down there, right? They're not too far south from where Foden are here in New York, just a quick drive down 95. But, you've got the academy set up. You've got a really, really hot rugby community in and around that area. At all levels of the game. Yeah. And so it becomes almost this like feeder system into the rugby culture and the community of the entire area there in DC that sort of creates that vibe. But growing up sort of where you were, and I assume in Auckland, right? Like you had that dream as a kid someday go and play professional rugby, be it for the Auckland Blues or wherever, but you grow up through that Mitre 10 pathway where you end up playing for Auckland. How does that sort of pathway compare to what you see here in the United States, and how can we work towards even more so creating a similar experience for young kids in the US that can kind of emulate what's going on down in New Zealand?
Shucks, it's a tough one. I guess it starts from obviously ourselves that are playing in the MLR. I think if we can play a brand of rugby, and like you guys, what you guys are doing now with the likes of the USA Rugby Clubhouse podcast, or just any sort of show that promotes our game, that puts players like our faces in front of a TV or in front of social media, because kids are on social media every day. And the more and more we pump that through, or pump the sport through social media, it will, I guess, inspire kids to be like, oh, I want to play this sport, I want to play rugby. And you see it nowadays, like a lot more kids are participating in rugby here in the US. Like when I speak to a few of the college boys, because I ask them, oh, well, what's the college system like? Like how are kids getting a hold of rugby? And you learn from them, and they're like, oh, man, they're not too far behind. But I guess I guess it's just, it takes years, I guess. And that's the slow grind, I guess, that the US are going to have to face, is that it's not going to happen overnight. Like they always say, like Rome wasn't built in a day. And I think that's pretty much where the league is at the moment. But they've made massive growth, I guess, from watching in the first season to their fourth. It's like, that's in the space of 4 years. Imagine what they're going to do in the next couple of seasons. And it's only getting better, like, because I know a lot of players from overseas are wanting to hit here. And then obviously the likes of Foden and, players like Andy Ellis and things like that. When you see players like that, of that caliber coming into this league, it just inspires players, like even for myself, to be like, man, I want to give the MLR a good crack, so that we can inspire those who are coming through, those who don't quite make it, I guess, in New Zealand or wherever in the world. I think the MLR is a great opportunity, and it's a good brand of rugby as well. So,
do you watch other American sports, Danny? Are you into the basketball?
Yeah, I love it, man.
Yeah, because it's funny you talk about that, because I think it's the same in the Southern Hemisphere as in the Northern Hemisphere in terms of our league, that it's all very, respect and be humble and all this sort of stuff, which, they're the sort of integral parts of being rugby. I feel with American sport, it's a bit different, that sort of goes out the window, and they sort of create these personas, so to speak, and these big characters, these villains and heroes of the game. Do you think that's going to come into the MLR, or would you like to see it in the MLR? Because I kind of do. I kind of like all the storylines, I like the grudge matches. Like, obviously, Old Glory just down the road from us. We've got you got Rooney here. We've got the Free Jacks close by. So there should be like a real big three-way rivalry between those three teams. But you need villains and you need heroes.
Yeah. It's funny you say that, because I think the biggest learning that I've taken from like my first experience last season is when I went back to New Zealand, and I just thought why don't we promote our game as well as we, like the Americans, like I seen like over here, the MLR, like there's not much of a following, but we pump out like content and we pump out players and profiles, and it benefits us as players, because we're constantly popping up on people's news feeds. So it's like, and you know what it's like as a rugby player, once your contract's up, where to next? So I feel as though that's where the MLR are doing really well. Like people like you said, from New Zealand, from the UK, wherever, from a rugby background, it's like, oh, it's a bit cringe. Like, oh, look at this guy, he's posting this and that.
Yeah.
But nowadays it's the way forward for the game. It's the way to grow the game. And I guess for us as individuals, as a player, it's for us to keep our jobs and, to keep moving forward.
Well, that's the key thing as well, is that you just mentioned it there, that I think some people fail to forget as well, fail to remember that especially in England, it's a job. Do you know what I mean? And you have 10 years to sort of like make enough money. And you do this when you're 18 years old. It's not like America where you get to go to university and come out with a degree. Then you fall into the NFL if you're good enough. But if not, then you have your degree to fall back on. it's sort of like you go from 18, you play professional rugby, and people are like, oh, you should stick with one club and you owe it to them. But then as soon as you're done and they don't want you anymore, they sort of like tear up your contract, see you later, next guy's on the conveyor belt. And they really get that in America. It's all about, you know, getting paid, getting the right money. And you see the coaches, like you watch these Hard Knocks programs, and the star quarterback or the star linebacker is sitting out the first 2 games of the season because he wants more money. And when he signs that contract and rolls back into training, the first guy shaking his hand is the head coach. Yeah. That doesn't exist in rugby at the moment. Do you know what I mean? Like it might start to do it in the MLR, but back home, you know, you're sort of making your contract with your head coach, and that's part of his role. Whereas I feel like American sport, they have the business is over there and the field is over here. And that's the way I think all sports should be. And if people can understand that there's a business for us, we've got to make our money to sort of provide for our families for not just 10 years, for like 20, 30 years, because, you know, that's what we've got to do.
Like what you said, like once you're done, you're done. Like you can easily be forgotten. And I've seen that with a lot of my friends back home in New Zealand, like my very good friend growing up, Sione Lawaki, who passed away. But I was at a young age, like I was very young, and like he was at his top pinnacle. He was playing World Cup. He was with the All Blacks, and like I remember him always like, you know, like your circle's like big circle when you're in the big, you're in the lights, everything. Everyone wants to be around you at the bar. And once you're done, the circle just gets smaller and smaller. Yeah. And like I always wondered, like I didn't understand what it meant at the time, but as you get older and as you go on throughout your career, you start seeing, man, I've actually got to do more for myself than actually for, like you said, be loyal to a team, or it's a business. And the sooner we realize that, or you know, the more we can like promote that to players, you know, I guess players will be better at making decisions for themselves rather than the emotional, like, yeah, I've played 100 games for this club, I'll stay here. Whereas you could earn more money somewhere else. It may not be the strongest team, but at the end of the day, once you're done rugby, no one's going to remember how many games you played or how many tries you scored and things like that. So, yeah, it's a funny one.
How do you feel about that, Mikey? Obviously, because you're sort of like, you've been American bred through all the integration of the system and stuff. How do you, when you hear Danny and me talk about that, coming to the end of your career and you realize that you only have the 10 years to get your money up?
Yeah.
Or are you still of the fact that like, no, I want to play rugby, and it's a privilege to sort of be able to play rugby for a living?
And you guys make us out to be like just money, like just money hungry, like just, if I was sitting here listening to this, like the average American person, just, you know, all about the wrong stuff. And I think as I sit and listen, I understand and I agree when now that the game is professional, it's a very, very different set of circumstances. It is a business, like you said, right? It is very much a business. And American rugby players, for the most part, have not been good business people, right? We play the game because we love it. I mean, I always have. I never played really, I played predominantly amateur my whole life. And so did the majority of the people I played with on the national team for the US, both men and women, to the extent that in many cases you pay to play, right? You pay for the privilege, you pay for the right, because really it was all about the camaraderie. It was about the jersey. It was about the community, the networks, the friendships you made, and the opportunity that you wouldn't have gotten in perhaps in any other realm. But so I hope that there's part of that culture that is so inherent in the game here that doesn't get lost, right? And it doesn't just become this enormous monstrosity of a business like the NFL or like the Major League Baseball or something else, right? And that's not to negate or retract from those players, like you said, who are doing great things. And at the end of the day, look, if you're an NFL player and teams are commercializing you as an athlete and as an individual, right? You have every right to be paid justly for that, right? Justly compensated for that fact. If rugby ever gets to that point, that would be great, right? And that's why we're here, is to help these young kids, these American kids specifically, to come through and to see that opportunity in rugby. But I really hope that loyalty, that true nature of our sport is not lost as it becomes more of this large, conglomerate of a business. And I think that it won't, because I think that the rugby community here in the US in general is a very unique brand of people. And I hope that continues to get pushed through down to the grassroots level about what the important, real, true core values of our game are. But like you said, when push comes to shove at the end of the day, if the MLR is really taken off, then hopefully players at the men's level, at the women's level, in both regards are justly compensated for that, because they will have deserved it at that point. You know what I mean?
Well, we're getting a bit deep there, but I agree with you. The core values of rugby will always I think they'll always be a founding building block of building the game in America. So I do,
but I also think that that's part of what makes our game unique too, right? Like, and maybe Danny, I think maybe you've experienced this a little bit down in DC too. Is anyone that you meet has some connection to rugby or some connection to the game in the United States, even though they may not follow it, they may not watch it. There's some inroads that they've heard of it, be it through college, like you mentioned with some of your teammates, or some nature of it. And they always have positive things to say about the sport. And they always talk about the culture of the entire community. And I think that that's sort of really ingrained in the roots of what American rugby is. And I think that that's not going anywhere. I hope that that's not going anywhere. It's a really important part of our identity, I think.
So Danny, I want to talk to you anyway about the opening game of the season with DC. I think you're the first team that's really been affected by COVID. Tell us about your first week and exactly what happened before you played the Free Jacks.
So I came out of so obviously I arrived the week before we played NOLA, and I had to do a 7-day ISO. So that was already hard enough. I couldn't really, so I just did a bit of running outside on the concrete. And then we came Monday, and I was like real excited. I was like, flip, man, I'm looking forward to getting into some rugby, because it'd been like 3 or 4 months from our last Mitre 10 Cup game. And then, Monday we had a preview and we did all that. So it wasn't much running involved. And then Tuesday morning we got a text saying, "Oh, we can't come in." Obviously there was a test that came back positive. And, from then I was just like, so does that mean we don't play? Because I'm thinking, sweet, we're professionals, but I don't think we should be playing if we haven't trained all week. And then come Friday, they made a decision. Apparently we were told we have to play the game on Sunday. So it just, made everything hard. Like, I still didn't know some of the players' names. Like, I got to the airport and I'm just like asking one of the boys, what's his name? What position is it? So it's like, so we're going in the warm-up, and I just was like, as a halfback, you're meant to give comms, but I just felt so bad. I was just like, wow, like I can't remember names and things like that. So I was just like, okay, I'm just going to have to just wing it. So went into that NOLA game and just like, I was real nervous because I was just like, I had no contact training. Like, I had done no contact, no running. And just, I was pretty lucky that we had sort of like the experienced boys to help us through. And it was just kind of like, oh man, we've got nothing to lose. Like, we just got to leave it all out there and then see how we go. So
didn't you get try of the week in the opening week as well yourself?
I did nothing. I just caught the ball and put it down. But all those boys, as a halfback, you just get to stand in the right position, you catch the ball. And
very humble, very. Well, you couldn't tell. I thought you guys looked like a good outfit. And NOLA, they gave us a hiding last week, so they're no slouch.
Big boys, They're some
big boys. They played a good game, but you guys, really put it to them as well. So fair play. And then obviously the next week you played 10.
Yeah,
you had a few injury problems in the 10 shirts. So you were on 10.
Yeah, so obviously Jason had to have a little surgery on his thumb, and we were training with our second string 10. Thursday he pulled his groin. Then our reserve 10, he said he had a bad hammy. So I captain's run, I was still at 9, and then coach came up to me at captain's run and goes, "I need you to play 10. And do you know all the roles for and the cues for 10?" And I said to him, "Yeah, but then he asked me if I goal kick. And funny enough, I just was like, "Yeah, I goal kick, but I don't." And then he gave me the goal kick.
Was to hear.
He gave me the goal kicking role, and then everyone saw me warm me up goal kicking on the game day, and then I was just like, I was just giving the boys a wink. I was like, and then one of my Jason and they were like, "Oh, when did you ever goal kick?" And I go, "Mate, 2012 was probably the last time I kicked at club level." And that was it. Like, I didn't have a tee. So on Friday, I was like, does anyone have a tee I can borrow to kick for goals? So yeah, it was like Dougie was like, can you kick goals? And I just gave him a confident answer, like, yeah, I kick. I haven't kicked in a while, but I can kick. And then he was like, yeah, I need you to do the goal kicking. So I was like, oh yeah, sweet.
Well, funny enough, you were losing when you were playing 10, and then you switched to 9 at half time, and you managed to win the game. So maybe
I went in at half time, and I told coach, I was like, can I go back to 9? Like, first 5's not working, like, because I found myself chasing rucks. So I was, as a 10, you're meant to obviously stay out, but I was just like, so I'm standing like right behind our halfback, and I was like, oh shit, I gotta move. So yeah, it's been an interesting last 2 weeks. And then obviously this week just gone, I wasn't too sure whether I was going to play 9 or 10. So yeah, it's kind of, it's hard, but you know, I'm always open-minded to like putting the team first. And like, I told the coach, like, if he needed me to play center or wing, I'll play there. Like, I'm not here for my own agenda. I just want to play because, you know, we all know what happened last year when rugby was taken away from us. It was like, you know, you're just like, like personally, I used to think, oh, I'm taking it for granted. Like I actually, like when we didn't have rugby for the last 2 months or in New Zealand, I was just like, I don't know what to do. Like I was lost. I was like, so now when I had the opportunity to play, it's more, I just want to enjoy it while I still have it or while we still can play the game. Because you never know, it's like something could be like, oh, you know, the league's going to finish next week. Or so I'm just trying to, week by week, I'm just trying to enjoy my days and enjoy being able to play rugby and be injury free, I guess. So yeah, I'm counting my blessings. I'm pretty lucky.
But Danny, now you've had a chance to get to know your teammates. It's been a couple of weeks, right? You finally get a chance to like not have to get guys' names the day like right before kickoff, but which is pretty funny. So you've got some names down there. You've got Threaten Palamo, who, you know, the most American rugby players in the rugby community know who Threaten is. Threaten and I played together a while back. I've known him for a long time. So he's a unit in the midfield for you. Must be nice having him to kind of throw the ball to. Yeah. I know you got as well Mike DeBoulis, right, is a local kid from this area, a New Jersey guy. I've been watching him since he was really young, fly half, fullback type of player. Young kid, lots of potential in the long term. But who are some other people that we should be looking at on the DC team to say, like in Major League Rugby, these are players that we should keep our eye on and watch that are really exciting that you've had the pleasure to play alongside now?
Definitely Mike Chickman, who's at 10. I think he has massive potential to grow in the game, and I think he'll be one of those players where he'll be established here in the US for a wee while. So and it's good because he's right behind a good 10. The likes of Jason, so he's learning a lot, and like you said, Fretton also, he's a veteran here. He must have been playing when I was in friggin' primary school, like, so he's still there. And then Sam Kasana, our wing from, I think he went to Cal Berkeley. He's a really good, he's a really quick winger. He's learning the game. Best thing about some of these kids is that they're willing to learn. And you know, obviously we live in the same apartment, so these kids, like, they come knocking on my door, and they just want to watch film footage, you know, and for me, it's like, it's awesome because, you know, the only way you're going to learn rugby is you talk about rugby, and it's like an everyday thing. So these kids are like constantly like wanting to learn and grow. There's DeMonte Noble. He's still quite raw, still learning the game, but as an athlete, I think he's quite talented. There's the likes of Jack Carroll. He's one of the reserve props. I think he's a local boy, and he goes really well. You wouldn't even think he was an American prop. And there's a few boys, Locks, Casey, and David Beach. I think they'll be they have a bright future in the game as well. So we're pretty lucky. We have a balance of college and, you know, obviously senior players. So yeah.
Ooh, taking shots at the American props, man. They're not gonna like that.
because our 2 props are from overseas.
Yeah, of course.
And but Jack Carroll was like last week, I thought he played really well coming off the bench, and he just, you know, I think just speaks volumes of him. He just comes into work and does his job, and he goes about his business, but. Yeah, no, there's some awesome props there, but I think Jack Carroll stands out for me because, you know, he's all American. I think he's pretty much, I think all our props are overseas props. I'm not too sure.
But that's awesome.
But that's what this is about right now, right? Like, I mean, this is especially in the early days of this league, it's about bringing in guys like yourself, bringing in the overseas props to really set that example for the young American kids, so that in 5 years' time, right, the American kids have seen exactly what the standard is, and they know exactly what the expectations are of professional rugby, and then they can set the standard and they can set the example for the long term, right? I mean, and Foden, I didn't mean to cut you off, but maybe that was sort of the direction you were going as well. You bring in a guy like Ben Foden to play in the back three, and the next thing you know, any player that's playing in New York has the rare privilege of playing alongside Ben Foden and getting to pick his brain and find exactly what makes him tick, and then bring that into their game. And it just elevates the entire standard of the league and the competition.
They need to watch Ben Foden's highlights, bro. They'll see all the line breaks.
Did you see his block last weekend? Did you see his try when they threw that block the other week in week 2? That was outstanding. He's taking on too many American sports here.
Still got it, eh?
He's been raving about the American sports. He's putting him into the playbook here in New York. He's throwing blocks for himself.
So Danny, obviously you're 29 now. You're 29.
Yep.
29. Someone would say you're in your prime. I mean, you're not like me and Mikey who sadly passed it.
Yeah, Dan. Do you hear him telling these guys kids? He's sitting here going, "These kids come into my room." Danny, you're talking to the wrong people here. Like, you're still a kid.'re still a kid, Danny.
Yeah. That's my bad. That's on me.
So, Danny, what are your aspirations for this season? Obviously, you're looking to like win the MLR, but have you still got one eye on playing for Samoa or anything like that? If they came and knocking, would you'd be willing to go to another World Cup maybe, or get over there and play a few games?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely always having my hand up to play for my country. And I've been lucky enough, I've been connected with the head coach, Salal Mapasua. Obviously, we've been in contact about, I guess, the future test matches and what that looks like. So, yeah, just, I'm always up to play for Samoa, but my first initial job is to play well here at Old Glory, and just to continue to, I guess, help my teammates be better. And I know if I do that well, then I know everything else will fall into place. So just trying to not focus too much on things like that, because I know in the past I have, and then it hasn't quite gone my way, and then it just, you know what it's like as a rugby player, you're just like, oh man, you start looking for things to fix. And whereas now, I think, like you said, when you get to an older stage, you're just like, okay, so it's not so much about me, it's about what I can bring to the table and what I can add to the team on and off the field. And then, then obviously those little, like, getting international call-ups and that will be ideal and will be mean, but we'll see how we go.
Exactly. Well, listen, I think you're speaking from a very inexperienced, an old head on a prime shoulder, because you're in your prime at 29. So you're past it. So, but yeah, I 100% agree with you. You can overthink things. Interesting enough, you spoke earlier, you were in limbo, not sure whether you wanted to do the 7 series circuit anymore, what you wanted to do with rugby, and suddenly an opportunity pops up. And I think you're playing, the way you're playing at the moment, you can see that you're playing with a smile on your face, you're enjoying your rugby, and then it shows. I think that it shows. And if you keep playing the way you are, with the MLR growing in stature and people taking notice of the caliber of rugby that's played, that I'm sure Samoa will be watching with eager eyes, and that call-up will come if you keep performing well for DC. Not too well, because we've got to play you a few times this year. So if you want to have a week or a few weeks, those are the weeks to do it.
So you land in DC and you've got to go into COVID isolation for 7 days or 10 days or whatever it is when you get here. How did you come over with your family? I know you have a young family, right?
Yeah, so
on your own.
I've got my wife and my 4 kids. So I just had a newborn, hence why I missed the whole preseason. I was meant to come over in Jan, but my wife had baby in Feb, and so like I'm very grateful for the staff and management here at Old Glory for allowing me to come like 2 weeks out from the first game. So we had our newborn, and my newborn's about 6 weeks now, and I've got my 3-year-old, 5-year-old. So my son turns 5 this week, and then my daughter who's 7. So all 4 of them, they'll be coming over soon. But yeah, it was tough, I guess, coming from New Zealand, being around family, to come in here, just me by myself. It's it's been tough, but I just been focused on just doing really well, making sure I just enjoy going to work and trying to enjoy my footy, because I know if I enjoy that, then it gets my mind off missing my family so much. So,
but your family are going to come out and be with you for the rest of the season, are they?
Yeah, so they'll be coming over in late May. We've kind of left it till late so that my 5-year-old can go to school and just get a taste of what school is, and then they'll head over here, and then so we get to.
Congratulations, Danny. That's awesome. So wait, so these are not the same kids that come into your room where you live now and ask you to watch rugby film. Those are your other kids. Those are your rugby kids.
Yeah, those are
your rugby kids.
My rugby kids. So.
Yeah, rugby kids. Okay, so wait. So just because this whole COVID thing is a nightmare, I'm sure, for everyone. And so you land here in DC. Your family's back home. Your young child is there. Your wife's there with your kids, and that in and of itself is difficult enough. How do you kind of get your feet under you in that first week? Is DC kind of helping you out? Like, are you getting food delivered? What are you doing in that week of time in a totally new country, hours away from home, from your family? Like, how is that all unfolding over those 7 or 10 days or whatever it is?
Man, I'm very lucky with the support that we have here at DC. We've got likes of John Manson, who's the manager, and Andrew Douglas, obviously the head coach, and Toshi Palamo and Tonga. I have a lot of support here. As soon as I got here, there was stuff in my fridge and things like that. I honestly did not have to do much. Like, everything was kind of already there for me, and it's a bit like I'm pretty lucky and blessed that I have a support crew like the likes of the people here at DC, and that's why when I play, I feel as though I owe it to them. I try and empty everything. Like, whether it's at training or when I'm playing, like, I'm not only playing for my family, but I'm playing for these guys who have made the sacrifices to set up my apartment or move things from my old house to here and things like that, and just to help make my transition more comfortable for me. So that's why I was able to go into NOLA. Although we didn't train the whole week, I kind of, I had the food. I had the food ready for me to eat for the rest of the week and things like that, and they helped me prepare. So yeah, so when I'm playing, I'm just making sure that I owe it to them. And if there comes a day where I feel like I don't want to train, I always remind myself of the work that everyone else has put in for me to be able to train. So yeah, I'm pretty lucky here at DC.
So the first app you download on your phone is Uber Eats, and you send the bill to Old Glory DC, basically. So this way you get.
I actually just had Uber Eats before I gave you guys the call, but I'm not really. I don't do Uber Eats, so only because I don't know how to work the app. In New Zealand, I don't need Uber Eats. I can just ask my wife, "Oh, are you cooking anything?" or things like that. Whereas here, my cooking is not really that great, so it's like either chicken and broccoli or I'm having Uber Eats.
Wait, so
yogurt and cereal.
You bring up such an important thing, though, because I mean, Fodes, you came in here to the US, right? And you landed. All these players are coming in from all over the world. And I remember we went over with the US to play Saracens, and this was years ago. And Saracens, as you know, Fodes, for a period of time there, like, they were the club to be at, and they had such a good culture and they had such a welcoming environment. They had someone in their staff whose primary role with the club was to help their players and the families get settled. So my wife was over there, and my wife's like coordinating and liaising with the Saracen staff. And so I'm checking in with my wife. I'm like, "Hey, what are you up to? We're getting ready to play these games." She's like, "Oh no, everything's taken care of. Like, we're all good. We've got rides, we've got food, we got everything taken care of." And it's like that sort of service, that level of service that teams are kind of putting out for players like yourself is so important to building that community within the program, that players like yourself want to be there, right? And you encourage other people to come back. And so it's awesome to know that DC is doing that type of stuff. And I'm sure that, and hoping that other teams throughout the league are doing more of the same too.
But what's also nice is to hear them, like you said, one of the things that's so key, especially for someone like Danny, who's got a young family, 4 kids, a wife who's overseas. You can't really focus as a player unless your wife is happy. Do you know what I mean? And when you've got the responsibility of kids and stuff. So it's so important that the professional clubs include the wives, include the girlfriends, include the kids, and then it becomes like a big family unit. And then you'll get guys like Danny who wants to empty the tank. He wants to do the best he possibly can for that club because they've looked after him, not only him, but his family too. So I completely get that. And it's awesome to hear that DC are doing that for you, Danny, and for the other players there. It's wicked.
But I think the real lesson here that we'll all agree on is that preseason is unnecessary, right? Like we don't need to be doing yo-yo tests in preseason.
I'm not saying that out loud, but if they come back in December,
I think that's really the big takeaway from this whole thing.
Well, Danny, we're going to take there. But thank you very much for coming on the show. Thank you very much for stopping by the clubhouse. Always a pleasure to speak to you. I've watched a bit of you on the 7 circuit, seen you play for Samoa a little bit, but watching you play in the MLR has been a delight these first couple of weeks, mate. You're an awesome 9, awesome to watch. Hairdos to rival mine, which is always nice. But yeah, pleasure to talk to you.
It's crazy because I don't know. I used to watch you growing up, and I used to think, "Wow, this guy's the man." And I remember, I don't know if you remember, I watched you guys train at Northampton Saints, but I came with my uncle. I don't know if you know him, Apollo Perolini.
Oh, Apollo. I was at Apollo.
That's my mom's brother. And I was over in the UK, and he took us to your guys' training grounds, and I was watching your guys' training, and I remember you from there, and I was like, wow, this guy. And there was like Chris Ashton, what's the hooker's name?
Dylan Hartley.
And then, like I remember, like vividly remember, and I was scrolling through Facebook. I was like, I'm sure I've got photos of taking photos of like Foden and that, like as a kid. It was in 2010. I remember
I've got a great story before you go. I've got a great story about Apollo. So Apollo Perolini is this legendary rugby league player, played rugby union, became one of the fitness guys and conditions at Sale when I joined, was at 18, 19. And he is ginormous, Mikey, biggest dude you'll ever see. We used to go to this gym, Total Fitness, which was an open gym. And there was these guys on the bench press, and they were obviously steroided up. So they're all big guys. And they're doing bench press, and they've got probably like 170, 175, 80 kilos on the bar. And they give it the big, like screaming, and everyone's sort of gathering around. And Apollo hates that sort of stuff. He's like, these guys just like, they're not even strong. Anyway, so they basically wrap the thing up, and Apollo wanders over and goes, hey boys, you finished on the bar? And they were like, yeah. And Apollo goes, cheers, like gets on the bar, takes it off, does like a rep of like 8 of them, just like it's nothing. Clicks the bar back up, going, yeah, cheers boys for the warm-up, and just walks off, and everyone was just like, these big roid heads. It was awesome.
Yeah, it's crazy because well, that's how long I've been following. But obviously, I was following you when you were at South Sharks.
Yeah.
Wait, my question, I've always wanted to ask you in person. Were you a halfback converted into a fullback?
It was. I played 9 all my life. Like all my life.
Yeah, when my uncle told me
I got my first England cap at 9. Everyone forgets this. I played 9 for England my very first time.
See, I knew that. I always knew that. Growing up, I was thinking, Ben Foden was a 9. He played fullback. So I was thinking, sweet, I can play 9 and fullback.
Oh, you play 9 fullback, 10 centre wing. You tell DC.
That's why, like the likes of Orenia and yourself, I was like, these guys are like 9 fullback, 10. Oh, so I'll do the same. It's a pleasure to actually hear you say that you've been following me. So it's unreal to be on the show. Thank you guys for having me. It's a privilege and honor to share, I guess, a bit of my story and I guess help promote this game. And what you guys are doing is like amazing, and I'm all for it. And I hope to hear from you guys sometime soon, and we'll see you guys around, hopefully in person this time. But
yeah, we'll see you in person. Don't be running too many rings around me though.
Nah, man, no way, not me.
All right, folks, it's that time again. Last week, we had the pleasure of checking out the college scene in San Diego. Let's check out this week's featured college program brought to you by therugbyshop.com for all your rugby apparel needs.
Sport has the power to change the world. It has the power to inspire. It has the power to unite people in a way that little else does. It speaks to youth in a language they understand. Sport can create hope where once there was only despair.
What is Colorado Rugby? It's an attitude that demands you to improve yourself, so that in turn, you improve those around you, both on and off the field. This attitude is instilled in our program because we are family, because we are brothers. We are Colorado Rugby.
Well, it's my pleasure to introduce our next guest. It's PFT from Pardon My Take, also part of the massive phenomenon that is Barstool Sports. Great to have you on, dude. I'm really interested in picking your brain because a birdie has told me that you've played a little bit of rugby in your time.
Yeah, I played a little bit. I got started in college, like a lot of people here in America probably did, when you make the sad realization that you're not talented enough to play soccer or football at the next level, and you still want to go out and get tackled and get potentially injured. So I really missed that. I missed the physicality. One of our friends, he's a coach at Michigan, Jim Harbaugh, says the human body craves contact. And I believe him. I think that that's actually true. So I missed, that contact. I missed playing a sport at, a medium high level. I was never good enough to be, really excellent at anything that I tried, but I was always kind of like exactly average. I had some friends that were like, hey, you should come out and play on the rugby team. I used to kick for the football team, so I had that skill set as well. And I started playing, I think early, maybe it was the summer before my sophomore year, and immediately fell in love with it. First time I went on the field, I had no idea what I was doing whatsoever, but I knew I was having fun. And so I played all throughout college. And then after that, I played a little bit down in Texas for the Austin Huns, wearing my Huns practice jersey right now. Played for them for, I think, 8 years. And, I just love the game. I like, some of my best friends that I've ever made in my entire life came from guys that I used to play rugby with. And it's the most fun sport that I've ever played. Like the second you step on that field, I'm telling you, you get addicted to it. And I love watching it. I love being around the games. I'm excited to see it growing here in the United States a little bit. It's been kind of taken off in the last 10 years or so. I've just kind of fallen in love with the sport, and looking forward to seeing where it goes in the future here.
It's awesome that you say that as well, because one of the things I always say when kids are like, oh, I want to be a rugby player, what should I work on? And I'm like, don't work on anything. The skill sets will come, but what you need to do is enjoy it. And you talk about like culture, and you learn like good life skills being in rugby as well, like social skills, but also like respecting the referee, like things like that on the field. So it's awesome that you say that, the culture is what grabbed you. You made some friends for life. All right, PFT, you mentioned that you fell in love with the game, but the big thing that I want to talk to you about is obviously, you've risen to sort of fame and from Barstools, and Barstools is sort of like, your thing is Pardon My Take with Big Cat, and you sort of sit there and you sort of like do the conversations that you sort of have with your mates in bars where you're completely frank and open and honest about it. And I think that's what people really relate to. And so I'm just thinking, like, is there a way that MLR rugby can sort of get into that sort of fold? Is there a way of you'd ever sit at a bar and watch the highlights in the background and chit chat about players in terms of what they're good at and what you can, what you see as a fan from sitting in the stands?
Yeah, I think that there's definitely some very easy ways that rugby can kind of take what's already popular in sports culture and kind of latch onto that and try to grow it that way. The obvious one is via legalized gambling, as it becomes legal throughout, all 50 states eventually to put money on the games. I think we're going to be looking to bet on just about any sporting event that's on TV. Like it's just fun to do. And if you do it responsibly, it's like a great way to stay involved in various sports that you might not have like an interest in, like in baseball. Baseball, to me, I pay attention to baseball opening day, maybe the first week or two. Then when there's a fight, I'll pay attention to that. And then I kind of tune out until the All-Star break. I pay attention to the All-Star game. And then I kind of tune out again until August. But I always like to have a little bit of action on the games going on. So it kind of forces me to follow along a little bit more, and I stay more involved in the sport, and it's fun to watch. So I think with gambling, I think that rugby has a tremendous opportunity, as do a lot of other sports, to really pick up a wider audience. And I think that what Major League Rugby should actually look at doing is they should look at really capitalizing on the dry spots in American sports. So like the week after the NCAA tournaments open, I'm talking to you guys on Monday night right now. there's about to be the final between Gonzaga and Baylor. I'm on Baylor plus 4.5. I know it's a square pick or whatever, but I'm on it. It's going to happen. I'm confident in that. But I think that what Major League Rugby should look at doing is maybe starting their season like immediately after that's over, because I'm gonna come home from work tomorrow and just turn on my television and just stare at it, hoping that there will be an entertaining live sport that comes on. And I'm going to get upset when I realize, no, it's just going to be a marathon of Charmed again on TNT. And so if there's a way to like really capitalize on these dead zones in American sports, I think that it'll definitely pick up an audience. The people that watch rugby that might have a rooting interest in it, they're going to kind of realize, hey, there's a lot of cool stuff that happens here. Like, I really like watching this game. It's fast paced. It involves, all the elements of sports that a lot of people here in America like. And you know what else you should also do? Color rush jerseys. Americans are just suckers for anything. If you make the jerseys just like a little bit brighter, we'll be like, oh my God, these things are incredible. That's amazing. They're wearing a different color jersey. We love we're suckers for those little like alternate aspects of the game. But I think that there's definitely room, a huge opportunity for rugby to get bigger and bigger and bigger here in the States, especially with the success of our sevens team that we've had. That's actually like a tailor-made product for American audiences. I think just make it as easy to find as possible, whether that be on a streaming service or if there's a television package, make it as easy to find as possible. Have the games start, maybe when there's that dead zone to capitalize on all the eyeballs that are looking for sports to happen. And then, just stay committed to cutting up all the highlights on social. And I think the product will speak for itself. It's just a matter of getting eyeballs on it.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because this year is the first year that the MLR have signed with a gambling company, I guess, in Genius. I don't know. I'm not very down with the kids in terms of the American gambling side, but Genius or someone that the MLR are partnered with. It's the first year they've done that. So that aspect's looked after as well. This season was delayed because of COVID. Usually start in sort of early February and sort of come off the tail of the NFL. And I think they were saying that our starting week is the week between the Super Bowl and the last game, because that's a dead week as well. There's not much sport on there, so they try and use that week to sort of do it. But I think with every sport, you sort of tail end the back of one big sport in America. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. Like, there's a cyclical nature to sports that we kind of have our calendars set to. Like, we don't follow the lunar calendar in America. It's just like, okay, after football is over, I know that pitchers and catchers are going to report to spring training like next week. And so you have like this baked in calendar that you keep in your head all year round. And I think just having it be exposed to as many people as possible is the way to do it. Let it grow organically, because until recently, like the biggest evangelists for rugby were guys that just, they started playing when they were 18 or 19 years old. They fell in love with it. And then after, their playing years are done, they go out and they become the biggest evangelists for the sports, because you get addicted to it, just like I did. Like Mike and I are great examples. We're both, I think, 5'9", 180-pound guys that found our calling in like a little, an American niche sport, but it's one that really, there's a position for everybody. You don't have to play at a high level. It's fun if you play Division III. I've played Division III, Division II, Division I. I've done all phases of the game, and the passion for the game really, it doesn't vary at all between the skill level. Everyone's kind of like in the same boat, and that's what's kind of beautiful about it. Is even like, the best players out there, the guys that are playing in Major League Rugby, and the guys that are, sitting the bench and getting in the 60th minute in a Division III game, they kind of all share that same bond and fraternity. And it's a very easy sport to fall in love with. So it's about just getting as many eyeballs on it as possible. It doesn't hurt having, a winning team. That's actually the best thing that's happened with US Rugby recently is the run that our sevens team has been on for the past few years. Winning just, it brings a whole new level of attention to it. And if you have players like Danny Barrett and Carlin Isles and Perry Baker and those guys out there, they're just natural highlight reels, so it provides a lot of content to pass around on social media to provide for highlights. I've seen Perry on SportsCenter more than a handful of times in the last few years with some of these crazy runs that he's been on. So having a winning team with those players who seem like they're tailor-made for highlight reels, like that goes a long way. And so it's all about keeping that momentum going here in the United States and having like a good, solid training program and continuing to get, elite athletes interested in the sport as well as, and you also want to continue to get, the Big Ten, get as many players as possible to start playing rugby as early as possible. And the best way to do that is just get it on TV, get people watching it, because the product is going to speak for itself.
Yeah, I think that you're right in saying that, but as well for the sevens, the big pull was the Olympic Games. As soon as it became an Olympic sport, America were in. That means they invested money and time into it. And also they sort of invested talent because they went and found other athletes from other sports. Like you mentioned, Carlin Niles and Perry Baker. Like Carlin Niles was a sub 10-second meter runner. He was, I think he was 40th fastest human being in the world, but unlucky for him, he was American, so he wasn't ever going to go to the Olympic Games. So they went and found him. And basically, because sevens is not quite as much contact, and there's a lot of sprinting up and down the field, they could really use his attributes that he brought from the track and made that to, use it to his advantage and really added a different dimension to America in the sevens team. A lot of talk about doing that with, NFL players, especially the guys who go to college, play a really high level of American football, don't quite make the transition from college level to American football, NFL, and then sort of fall out of sports and together. So there's a lot of talk about trying to find those kind of players. Do you reckon that crossover still exists?
Yeah, I think it does exist. The skill sets are similar, but what's been kind of unique about Perry is a guy like him. Yeah, he's got like all the tools, and he was a football player, and Carlin as well. But what I've seen from Perry Baker in the last few years is he's become a complete rugby player. Like he's strong in the rucks now. He understands the game. He understands positioning, and that comes from reps. But it also takes a certain type of player to be able to, have the passion to follow through and dedicate yourself to learning all assets of the game. He's been a great example of what we could do with some of that talent. I do think that there is value in finding big name like college football players that maybe aren't good enough to play in the NFL, but have, a huge athletic background, and using the names and giving them an outlet to play professional sports, while at the same time kind of growing the game, because you've got already hundreds of thousands or millions of people who know who these guys are. Like I always joke about Tim Tebow being a baseball player and how I would always root for him, just because I'll watch Tim Tebow do anything. I don't particularly like the guy. He's just a fascinating person to watch play different sports. But I always said that he would have been a perfect candidate to play rugby because he can't throw a forward pass, but he's really good at running with the ball, and he's a great leader. And he would have had, a lot of intangible qualities that would have made him a decent rugby player. And he's got that big audience that comes behind him wherever he's going to go. So yeah, I think having the combines that are set up for players that might not make an NFL roster, if it gives them an outlet to make some money while maybe their goal is still on the NFL, I think that that's a good thing. But the best thing that's going to come out of that is going to be the guys that start playing rugby, really enjoy it, and focus on getting better at the game of rugby instead of using it as a vehicle. I think that there's value in both sides, but the most value I think is going to come from finding, maybe 1 out of every 50 of these guys that played at, the University of Texas or Stanford that might not make it into the NFL. 1 out of every 50 of them might fall in love with the game, and they've already got that raw athleticism and the talent and the dedication to become actually pretty decent rugby players for the United States in the future. And I think that that's going to help a lot in growing the game. I really do. Also, I'm a sucker for this. So my brain works in like 2 different hemispheres. One is like serious ideas, and the other is just stupid, dumb ideas that actually have like a little bit of truth to them. And in that side of my brain, there should also be live animal mascots, because Americans love a live animal mascot. That's one of the things that's college football, college basketball. If I see a team that I have no allegiance to, but it has like a little dog, like a little bulldog that's running out across midfield, barking at the other team, I'm like, yep, okay, I'm going to bet on that team. And that team is now my favorite in this game. So like a live animal mascot for each team, just for the social media factor of it, I think would be incredible. But again, that's one of the dumb ideas that I think actually at the end of the day, it has an effect in my lizard brain. If I see Smokey the dog come out there at Neyland Stadium before a University of Tennessee game, I get more excited to watch the football game because I know that dog is going to be also watching the game.
Well, this is what's weird as well, because I'm obviously British and I played a lot of my rugby back in England, and it's very straight and narrow. Everything, even when you're taught from an early age, like your press conferences and how to do those. It's always be respectful of the opposition, be, you know, humble, all this sort of things. And one thing I've realized from American sport is, you know, that's out the window. Everyone's in it for themselves. Their team are the best in the world. Even if they've lost all the games before that, they're still going to smash the opposition at the weekend. You've got Juju Smith dancing on the emblem before games. You know, like you talk about mascots, cheerleaders, and I'm all for that. I think that's great. I think what people need to realize, especially in, you know, the Southern Hemisphere and in the Northern Hemisphere with rugby, is that sports are a show. It's a big show at the end of the day. And so you need to create icons, you need to create heroes, you need to create villains for each, you know, team. And so when they take the stage and they're playing the game, that's what they're giving you, a big show. And so I couldn't agree with you more in that sense. But I think it's going to be hard for a lot of rugby fans, diehard rugby fans, to get that wrapped around their head. But
Yeah, that's fine. I actually think you're dead on about you need a villain. Sports are more fun when there's a villain that you're rooting against. Like a great example is I hate Danny Cipriani, but I used to watch him play all the time. Right? Like he's a guy that you would only like to root for if he was on your team. If you're playing against him, you're like, I want them to bury that guy through the center of the turf, you know? And that's how a lot of people feel about Juju Smith-Schuster when they play against him, because he does the TikTok dances at midfield. And my only qualm with his dances at midfield was they were dumb dances. He should have done a better dance. The one that he was doing was like, what are you doing, man? It looks weird out here. I don't think that your teammates are exactly getting fired up watching you dunk. So you're right about Americans have, you know, more of an arrogance to them when it comes to sports, but that's fun. Sometimes sports are supposed to be fun. And yeah, it's great to have, you know, teams that fight hard, but respect each other at the end of the day. And I think that's actually true more often than not, that even the players that like to showboat and like to dance and like to do all these other sort of, they still end up respecting their opponent at the end of the day. And if they don't, then there's going to be bad blood, and that just makes actually for a more entertaining product the next time those guys get together on the field.
How would you go around making yourself a big name in a sport like Major League Rugby? Because it doesn't really have the fellowship of the NFL or basketball and that sort of stuff, but it still has the same sort of platform, being a professional sport. You know, we're paid athletes. There's that rivalry. There's the big hits. There's the, you know, the fancy scores and that sort of stuff. So there's, a platform for people to sort of put themselves out there. But how does that cross over to the MLR? Because, you know, I would love to see it, especially I'd love to see American homegrown players sort of taking that. It's all well and good, like Mar Nonu coming over from New Zealand, Chris Robshaw coming over from England. I would love to see the rise of American stars.
A shortcut, and that's how my brain works again, is just in shortcuts sometimes. So take it with a grain of salt. Better nicknames. If there's somebody out there that's just named Beast Mode, I'm going to watch Beast Mode play. You know, if there's a guy that's named Big Country, I'm going to be like, yeah, I want to see what Big Country has to do. So there's small marketing things, putting the nicknames on the back like the XFL used to do. It's a shortcut to getting more eyes on the product. Again, I don't know how realistic it is, but these are all things that absolutely work. Like, I'm going to watch it. If I know that there's a guy named Beast Mode playing any sport, I'm going to watch Beast Mode play.
Yeah, especially when he says he's going to run over a motherfucker again and again and again.
Yeah, exactly. See, it's fun. That's what it needs to kind of embrace. A little bit of the wild card element, or I don't know if I should say wild card, but a little bit. It needs to embrace the excitement, because sometimes rugby has a tendency to kind of I don't want to say it like downplays the excitement level, but it does. There's a lot of serious sportsmanship that goes on. It has a little bit of a marketing problem in the United States, and the only problem that it does have, because it's so great to watch once you tune in, is getting people to tune in for that very first time. So I'm of the mindset that anything that you can do to get people to check it out once, you're going to have people returning to watch it again and again and again.
Yeah, again, from an outsider's perspective, coming into America, all eyes are on this league. All eyes. I know all my friends, all my teammates from back in England, back in the Southern Hemisphere, back in France, are all looking at this league and waiting to see what happens, because they know that if the MLR gets, 10% of the traction that the NFL does, you got Patrick Mahomes signing a $500 million deal. If you know, if a player in the MLR could even like earn $2 or $3 million a year, that is massive in terms of the rugby world. And so suddenly there would be this massive flip in people trying to get to this league and playing. And obviously America being so big, there could be potentially 32 teams playing in a league, which would be massive. But it's just, you know, like you said, it's trying to find an American audience and relating to them. It's one of the reasons why we started the show, for instance, is trying to grow an American audience. And one reason why we were really keen to have you on, because you've managed to do that at Barstools with what you're doing. You've found an audience that's obviously they relate to a very big sport in terms of the NFL and what you talk about, but you found that market and you've really like managed to drag it in and then captivate it. And so, you know, it's interesting talking to you, listen to you talk about rugby, obviously from your perspective of all sports. But tell us a little bit about what you do on your show anyway. So, you know, PFT is a pseudonym, I'm guessing. And what does it stand for?
Yes, it stands for Pro Football Talk Commenter. So I got started writing. I started a Twitter account, I think back in 2012, because I saw a lot of people writing the strangest takes that you could ever imagine on the Pro Football Talk website, which is like the biggest website, or was the biggest website. I don't know where it stands now, but it's a massive website that covers the NFL and all the stories that go on there. But the commenters on that website, I'm sure you've seen internet comments before, and these internet commenters made the standard internet commenter look like Albert Einstein. It was crazy how dumb they were. And so I started thinking to myself, what if you gave one of those commenters an entire column, like an entire blog to write? And so I started writing these columns from the mindset of those commenters. And then one thing led to another. And eventually a few years later, I started to do this podcast with Big Cat at Barstool, and it kind of took off from there. I think a lot of people were looking for people that talked about sports in a funny, like lighthearted way, because sports are supposed to be fun. And I do think that there's definitely a lane that needs to exist where people talk about the more serious aspects in sports. But I know that that's not something that I'm great at. And there should also be a place where people can enjoy sports. It's just, you know, it's something fun that we watch, and it's a great pastime. Like I grew up watching every single major sporting event with my dad, and we used to, you know, have these crazy arguments about, you know, essentially every game that happened, we would get into a fight about something. I remember my dad telling me that Christian Laettner was an asshole and he never won an NCAA championship the night that he put the nail in the coffin to Kentucky. But I think that that's an element that has kind of gotten lost recently, where no one discusses sports in like a fun, lighthearted way. And we do dive into some of the serious stuff when we have to, but overall, I think it's just, you know, it's just a testament to Big Cat, me, Hank, and everybody else at Barstool, like having just a commitment to putting out a consistent show that we obviously have fun doing 3 times a week for the last 5 or 6 years. And so it's been really fun to be a part of that. And I try to bring up rugby as much as I can on the show. I get locked in my little crate if I bring it up too much. So I have to kind of feel out the exact right amount to do it. I remember a couple years ago, this is when the US team was first starting to get really good at sevens, I would have a weekly rugby update. And it felt like the running joke became that the US remains in first place atop the world standings because we finished in second place in the most recent tournament. And so every week I'll be like, USA Rugby's back. We're at the top of the table. And then Big Cat would be like, oh, so they won. And I was like, no, they finished in second place, but they're still in first place. And so it became like a running joke, and I had like a little storyline that kept going for the next couple of years. But I try to bring it up as much as possible. But yeah, it's been a fun ride the last few years for sure.
Well, it's much appreciated by us involved in the game, because, you know, having guys like you, your influence that you have on sport is just going to bring eyes to the game. So we're very appreciative of what you do, PFT, talking about rugby. Whatever we can do for you to try and make you a more content. If you need highlights, we'll send them through. We'll send you whatever you need to be talking about rugby. There was one question I want to ask you, though. Sure. If you had to support a team in the MLR, which team would it be? Do you know all the teams in the MLR?
I don't know all of them, but I've been going back and forth on that because I played for the Huns down in Austin for several years, and there were elements of that team that kind of formed offshoots and ended up becoming the Austin MLR team. So I do have some like personal connections with that team and people who are still involved with that team that I know really well. There's the DC Glory, and I am from Washington, DC originally. Right. So that's kind of a natural fit. And then the Seawolves sent me a jersey, and I just like the name Seawolves. There's really no connection there. It's just a cool name. And then last year or 2 years ago, Nate Ebner and Patrick Chung came into the office when they were getting involved with New England. And so I like those guys a lot. So I'm split really three ways between New England, Washington, and then Austin. So I could be swayed. I could be swayed either depending on if a team.
What about Rooney, Rugby United New York? You're in New York, aren't you? Is that where you're based?
I'm in New York right now, yeah, but I don't know if I can get behind a New. Once you start to root for New York teams, it's like a domino effect. Next thing you know, I'm going to be a Mets fan complaining about the 7 train. It's going to get ugly fast if I choose. That's a dark path to go down. And then, yeah, let's just leave it at that. That's a dark path for me to go down to become a New York sports guy. So I'm not sure I'm prepared to like call into the Mike Francesa show and complain about, who should be playing fly half. But there's another way that you guys, or that rugby in general in the United States, could just have an immediate shortcut to having a much broader audience, or at least more attention. And this is something I've tried to do, is just straight up convince Mark Cuban to buy a rugby team, because he played rugby in college. He's a big fan of the sport. He's got the money to spend. And if you can get him to buy a rugby team, he's going to put money into it because he doesn't want to lose. It's pathological for him, where if he's going to go into something, he's going to try to win. He's going to pay a ton of money. I don't know what the structures of contracts are. If there's a salary cap situation in rugby right now, or if it's just, pay whoever you want, however much you want. But I do know that Mark Cuban, if he were to take ownership of a team, he would definitely inject some cash, at least into his team, to try to win. And that would be a great thing. And I've told Mark that he should do that. He's been on our show a few times. And every time I talk to him, I'm like, you need to buy a rugby team, Mark. You have to do it. So get Mark involved, and then convince Jeff Bezos. Hey, Jeff, since he couldn't buy the Washington football team, buy a rugby team instead.
Buy all of the rugby teams and put all the money in. But it's interesting to say, Mark, because Mark Cuban always talks about rugby, has an interest in it. He's one of the reasons that George Kilbrew is the head honcho of the whole MLR as well, coming from the Dallas Mavericks when he worked with Mark there. So there is that element. I'm with you on that. We've got the guy who owns F45 gyms, Gilchrist, who owns the Gilgronies, the Austin Gilgronies, named after a new beer that he's launching as well. So I think you and him would get on. He has some quirky ideas that would sort of spark the interest of the American fans. So name is he also owns the LA Giltinis. He's gone full out over there, bringing in Matt Gitto over from Australia to play for them. So, but there are a few of those, you need like sort of 10, 12 of those sort of guys to appear on the scene there and put the money behind the idea. And yeah, I'm confident that it'll get there. It's going to take a bit of time, but I'm definitely confident we're going to get there.
Yeah. So also try to get Vince McMahon interested as well, because if you want storylines, if you want the best possible American conflict and storylines, get his brain involved in it. He'll come up with some crazy ideas for you.
Well, another guy who is interested in the sport from WWE is John Bradshaw, JBL. He's a big rugby fan. He's living out in Bermuda, I think, with his wife, but he's a massive rugby fan. I know that he was interested in being a part owner of the Rugby United New York team. So back in the heyday when it was just starting off. So yeah, we are literally, I'm trying to make connections for everyone to get involved in this sport. And the more people we get involved in it, the more people are talking about it, the more interest it's generated and all that sort of stuff. So we're all for it. So if you're listening, Vince McMahon, get your checkbook, write a check, buy a team, let's go. We're ready for you.
If any teams are coming up for sale, let me know, because I don't know how much they're going for, but it's been my dream to one day be an owner of a rugby team. So if anything happens, I'm not saying I have the cash, but I'm saying there are several banks on my street that don't have security cameras. So you just keep me in the loop on that.
Okay, final question before I let you go, PFT. We want to know, Barstool's King of the Ring in a Run It Straight challenge in rugby, who is the toughest guy in Barstool? I mentioned to you before that obviously you had Billy Football who did the rough and rowdy, and we're trying to do a similar thing. Who would make that crossover to the MLR best out of all the guys at Barstool?
Billy could do it. I actually think that Billy could potentially be a professional rugby player if he put his mind to it. Now, I'm not saying that he's going to put his mind to it, because he's not, because he doesn't really put his mind to anything for longer than 30 seconds. But Billy is a guy that one day just showed up and we told him to run a marathon, and he just ran a marathon with no training whatsoever. And he's, as he puts it, he's built different. I think that he could absolutely, you probably dominated that. Although Coach Stuggs is a big boy, Frank the Tank is a big boy. And then of course I'd have to toss in Willie Colon. Willie played for the Pittsburgh Steelers for like, I don't know, 10 years. He played for the Jets for a while. So if there were to be like a one person can leave a room contest, Willie would just kill everybody with his bare hands. But for a run at straight, I think I'm going to go with Billy Football. I think he could do it.
Is Billy Football one of those guys who's just annoyingly good at every sport? Like you chuck him a bowling ball and he bowls a strike. You give him some darts, he hits triple 20. Is he one of those guys who's just naturally oozes sporting potential?
Everything except for quarterback, the one position that he wanted to play. Yes. So, so I think, and that, I mean, I'm busting Billy's balls. He was a good high school quarterback, never played in college, got moved to wide receiver. But yeah, I think he would be the guy that right now, as we stand, would probably have the best chance at beating everybody else.
So there we have it. Billy Football, get your boots on, get down to a training session. We'll see you in the MLR. All right, PFT, thank you very much for coming on the show. Always a pleasure having someone like you come into the clubhouse, giving your unique perspective on the league and all things American sport. Awesome to chat to you, dude. Thanks for dropping by.
Yeah, great to meet you guys. Good luck with everything.
Right, guys, we're at that point of the show again where it's time for Budgie Smuggler's Hidden Talent. Yeah, a competition where you can win your entire team a full matching set of Budgie Smugglers. All you have to do is get online, film your video, tag us on Instagram at USA Rugby Clubhouse using hashtag Smugglers Hidden Talent. You can get creative as possible. You can do backflips, singing, dancing, get as creative as you want, make the video really stand out, and you could win that fantastic prize at the end of the season. Good luck, guys. Wow, what a show we've had today, Mike. We are blessed in terms of the guests we've got. It's awesome to hear PFT, a guy who's really soaked in American sport in terms of the NFL, but a guy who's surprisingly really knowledgeable about rugby. And I think that he has some massive points that he's made that could really, really teach us something about making MLR rugby and rugby in America big.
I think he represents, listening to his story about how he got into it in college, I think he represents this whole demographic of untapped athletes that rugby can really sort of lean on in the coming years. And there's all these high school athletes that play an array of different sports, as he did growing up. And then all of a sudden you meet the rugby players at school and they rope you into coming out to play the game. And all of a sudden you fall in love with it. And, that story is all too common in the American rugby landscape. And the more that we can have similar stories like his, at all levels of the game, I think that's only going to benefit Major League Rugby and rugby in general across the board. So there's so many people out there like that. We just need more of that for sure.
Yeah. And how can you not be rooting for Danny after listening to him about his family, COVID, how he just wants to leave it all out there on the field, does it all with a smile on his face, takes it in his stride, which I love. I think that, he has a really positive mindset and he'll be a great asset to DC going forward.
He's an exciting player. He's a really great guy to talk to. I almost said the word kid because I'm listening to him talk about the kids on his team. I always say he's a really good kid to talk to, but he is. He plays the game with a smile on his face, which is refreshing to watch. He's obviously having a lot of fun, and it's a lot of fun to watch him. And we were definitely privileged to have him on our show.
Add those guys to the array of other stars that we've had on from the MLR, Nicole Scherzinger, Christian Wade, the NFL superstar. We're building quite an alumni of guests on this clubhouse. Been interesting.
It's building. We're going deep into the Ben Foden Rolodex, I think, but it's building.
It goes deep. We've got more to come. Don't you worry about that. Anyway, let's get back to rugby. Getting towards the end of the show. We're looking forward to round 4. Rooney are back in action. There's going to be 5 fixtures this week. Only 2 teams have got a bye week. First game up, LA on the road, first time against Toronto, who put in that big performance of the weekend. Which way do you see that one going, Mikey?
Oof. It's hard to not pick LA, but we haven't seen them on the road yet. And bear in mind, folks, I am really hurting when it comes to these picks. I am hurting here, but I'm going to stick with Los Angeles. I think that Los Angeles has a great outfit. I think they're seasoned players. I think they're used to life on the road. Maybe not during COVID, but the reality is, I think that they've proven that they're a good organization. I think this will be a real test for them, but I do think that Los Angeles will persevere in that one.
I'm going to go against you, Mikey, which I know would be unpopular. I think that Toronto are starting to find the way that they want to play. They're starting to settle in Atlanta because I know that they're away from Toronto. And I think, a 10-hour journey on a plane from LA could have its toll. These guys have come over, they've had it all their own way, the nice weather, they're at their stadium, they're at home, they've got all these big names coming in. I think it might be a little bit of a time for a rude awakening for the LA team. So I'm going Toronto. Our next game is Austin as they take on NOLA at NOLA. NOLA Gold, after the performance against us last weekend, they're a good setup. I know Austin is sort of getting better as well, and they've put in some big performances, but it's a tough one. I think that's going to be a really close game. I'll probably go NOLA. I think NOLA, I think NOLA will edge it. I just think them playing at home might give them the edge because it's always like a little bit hot and humid. It's a little bit different from playing in Austin. I think that might be in their favor a little bit.
I'm in the NOLA camp too, and having been there, I think NOLA is a tough place to go and play. It's not easy to go down to New Orleans and play rugby, like you said. The atmosphere is very different than anything else you've probably experienced anywhere else in the country. They've got a good organization, and did they have the week off this past week?
They did.
Yeah, so they're coming off of a rest week as well. So you got to take that into account too. So they're going to have fresh bodies coming in. I mean, Austin's coming off a high of just thumping Houston this past weekend. But I'm with you. I'm gonna stick with NOLA for this one.
And just talking of Houston, that's the next fixture. San Diego traveling to Houston. Both teams struggling to get the W's. It could be interesting. Houston will be looking to get back on track, but just the way they're playing, the 2-0s in the last game is very worrying in terms of putting your attack together and stringing in a performance. San Diego will be hurting, and although the scoreline wasn't very flattering for them, they didn't play that badly. It wasn't a blowout. They still had moments where, Sam scored a really good try through the middle. They still have players. Obviously, Nate could be back in the mix as well. And give them that 9-10 combo that they've been craving. But they are traveling. They're traveling all the way to Houston, which could, play a part. So how do you see that one ending up?
I mean, Sam Wuching's been a powerful presence for San Diego all season. I feel like every game he's had at least one big breakout run. He's a menace on both sides of the ball. And, he brings so much physicality to their game. But like you said, they've been off, and we talked about that a little bit before. That said, I still think Houston is really struggling. I think even with San Diego on the road, I'm still going to stick with San Diego. They're a team that I've always had my eye on as a good organization. I think they're going to pull this one through, and I'm going to lean on the Legion here.
Yeah, both teams hurting. I think it'll be the game to watch, to be honest. It'll be interesting to see how it works. But again, I think I'm with you. I think Houston are in a little bit of a dead spot at the moment, and they need to bounce back. And until they show they can put a score line together, I think you've got to back San Diego. So I'm with you, San Diego, to take that one. Another team that struggled a little bit, but Seattle versus Utah, Seattle at Utah as well. Another tough game. Seattle needs to start winning games, otherwise some big questions here. But one thing I will say about Seattle is they're still signing players. They're still strengthening their squad. And so I think that will play to their strengths as well. Utah will be hurting after the weekend because I think it was a game they thought they could have won. And I mentioned earlier on, they had the territory, they had possession. They just met a very resilient Free Jacks team who really gunned it out at the end. So it's going to be a tough game. I can't really see past Utah, though. I think Utah are one of the informed teams in the league.
Well, those are two teams that if you look at MLR history, not that it runs very deep, but the past couple of seasons, at least anyway, they've really literally just like almost traded places. I mean, Seattle always sitting at the top, Utah always sitting somewhere near the bottom. They've literally seesawed now, with Utah sitting pretty much top of the table and Seattle sitting way down the bottom. I think Utah playing at home is going to want to hold on to that position. They've been playing really well. Like you said, I think they were unlucky against the New England team that was at home in their first game ever at their home ground. So I'm sticking with Utah for that one for sure. They're a class organization so far, and I think they're going to continue to show that this weekend against Seattle.
And the last fixture, I can't, obviously I'm very rose-tinted spectacles when I'm looking at this fixture. It's still Rooney Roosters at Atlanta. I'm looking forward to playing. It's going to be a good game. My old mucker, Mark O'Keefe, who I played with last year, he's on the wing, so I'll have some good banter with him back and forth. But it'll be a tough fixture, that one. And I'll let you decide who you think is going to win. And you don't have to say Rooney, just because the pressure of me staring at you down the screen. But what your takes?
That's a tricky one, but I do think that's a game of the week. I know you've called that San Diego and Houston is going to be a good one, and I'm not disagreeing with that. I think that's going to be a really good game to keep your eye on. But I think the New York Atlanta game is one to really, really keep your eyes on. There are two cities that generally, when you talk East Coast rugby, you look back at US Rugby Super League and you look at the likes of some of the teams that are up in the New York area, some of the teams that are in the Atlanta area. There's definitely some good rivalry there that kind of runs deep in each of these clubs. And I think that it's going to be one that won't disappoint. New York's coming down off of a bye weekend last weekend. So guys like yourself, you get to rest the likes of Ben Foden, you get to rest the likes of Andy Ellis, right? They get fresh legs coming in. I'm biased, of course. I'm always going to root for New York. And I do think that you all have the athletes and the class to win this weekend on the road in Atlanta. So I'm going to stay true to my roots, and I'm going to pick New York for sure.
Nice. And I'll give you that $50 later on. Don't worry, Mikey. Well, you've heard it here anyway. Our predictions for next week's results. We've had a fantastic show. As always, Mikey, always a pleasure talking to you. Always a pleasure talking to our guests. Rounding off nicely, and what a week for the MLR. Ups and downs, trials and tribulations, hearing from Danny about COVID, hearing from PFT about developing the game. It's very exciting stuff. Lots to look forward to. I still think that everyone's sort of vying for position. I think New York sit bottom of the table at the moment, and we're one from one. So, I'm looking forward to seeing how this season pans out for a lot of teams, a lot of organizations. So thank you very much for all our guests coming on this week. And as always, until next week, we'll see you in the clubhouse.